I love the Batman in parentheses 2022. You may not think that from the title, but it's true. It's the most accurate comic book adaptation after Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. There were several scenes where I could vividly imagine how it would be laid out as a comic, and it also borrows very heavily from specific Batman comics. The detective scenes especially are extremely well done. With that, however, are the weaknesses that come with comic books, and especially Batman comics. The way it juggles a comic tone with the self-serious medium of film borders on whiplash, as well as the convoluted and hard-to-follow plot that fizzles out towards the end. There's a bunch of out-of-context clips shared all over Twitter. It's an absolutely phenomenal movie. Again, this is probably the most entertaining superhero film I've seen since Guardians of the Galaxy, but not always intentionally. I'm honestly glad this movie was made, but at the same time it represents everything I hate about the current state of superheroes as a concept. I've seen a bunch of people on Twitter say this film is too serious and not funny enough, but I cried laughing in the cinema. And I don't know if it's because I saw it with friends or if it was genuinely that hilarious, but either way, it was such a fun experience. It managed to capture the same comic tone as the Tim Burton films, but without being grotesque. The Penguin is a great example of this. Colin Farrell is just as entertaining a presence as Danny DeVito's interpretation, without the edgy aspect. Batman and Catwoman's first few interactions remind me of a sibling rivalry. Their performances are too comedic to not be intentional. The way Batman is treated like an angsty teen who still uses Tumblr throughout the film is so engaging and interesting from a character-building perspective. The scene where Alfred informs Bruce of something really boring as he puts on sunglasses and says, "Interesting," is just masterpiece filmmaking. Riddler's reveal as a Twitch streamer also really cracked me up. It pulled off some serious moments as well, don't get me wrong. The way it paralleled the voyeur scenes of Riddler and Batman throughout the film and the way they used shadows, the introduction of Riddler at the beginning genuinely scared me. It was an effective use of horror with just a still person in a room, not even a jump scare, and it highlighted the film's genius use of lighting. The casting was amazing. Everyone did an incredible job of portraying each of their respective characters. Zoe Kravitz is the definitive Catwoman, and Robert Pattinson is perfect at portraying an inexperienced Batman. The fight scenes reminded me of how I played Arkham Asylum for the first time, which is to say not very well. But that's not a knock against the movie, that's perfect for this version of Batman. It had impeccable sound design as well. I physically felt every step Batman took in the film. It was amazing at displaying impactful action scenes, as well as quiet moments for emotion or suspense. The soundtrack was perfectly ominous and oppressive. Michael Giacchino is a genius composer, and he really brought his A-game to this movie. Actually, I want to magnify the soundtrack real quick, because I think it perfectly represents what this movie is like to watch. The titles on all of these songs are charmingly silly, and yet the content is edgy and brooding. Now, I should probably talk about the substance. I'm not going to recap the film because I assume all of you have seen it already, and it's probably still fresh in your memories. I think this movie has a real problem with commitment. If I were to describe it as a Disco Elysium achievement, I would call it the laughable centrist. This is because it doesn't go the route of Batman being a complete fascist like Frank Miller's adaptation, but it also doesn't go the Batman the Animated Series route. The film seems to have a basic understanding that classism is bad, and killing is bad, and corrupt police are pretty bad, I guess? But it fails to understand how or why these things are bad. 2/3 of this movie has extremely powerful and meaningful things to say, and then it immediately undercuts it with some bullshit terrorist plot at the end. Honestly, if it ended with the interrogation scene, I would have absolutely no complaints with this movie. It's not exactly the same as Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, but it has a similar effect. At least in this movie, they almost form a point. The Renewal Fund is, to me, an analog for the Reform movement, and I don't think that was intentional by the filmmakers, but it makes the most sense. It is a plan to fix Gotham that ultimately doesn't change the systemic issues and consequently makes the rich even more rich. The Riddler is, in reality, justified for being upset with this plan. I've been reading a lot of Angela Davis and Rosa Luxemburg, and seeing this was an interesting coincidence I found. People who pronounce themselves in favor of the method of legislative reform in place of and in contradistinction to the conquest of political power and social revolution do not really choose a more tranquil, calmer, and slower road to the same goal, but a different goal. Instead of taking a stand for the establishment of a new society, they take a stand for the surface modifications of the old society. There's no real change taking place, and by the end, Riddler, for some reason, thinks drowning the entire population will enact change, and everyone gives up on fixing the society.
You know this place is never gonna change.
As good old Slavoj Žižek said, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. Thomas Wayne, who created the fund, is ultimately seen by the movie as a morally correct figure who made a little whoopsie. That's a direct quote from the movie. And as for the police force, well, the police are constantly shown as corrupt and antagonistic towards Batman until Falcone is arrested and he says something to the effect of, "I owe the police, I'll get out real soon." And immediately Gordon is like, "Not all of us." I audibly groaned when I saw this. Not all cops are bad, trust me bro, please. The politics of this movie is basically, killing is bad, cops are good, don't think about the problems of the inherently racist and classist institutions, and trust that Batman will save the day.
If you get shown a problem, but have no idea how to control it, then you just decide to get used to the problem.
The ending isn't all worthless, however. The reveal that Riddler started a fringe group from Batman's rhetoric, "I am vengeance," is actually very fascinating. It mimics the actual use of Batman iconography and mythology to push propaganda and right-wing virtues, like The Dark Knight Returns. The only inaccuracy is that they wouldn't attempt to kill the mayor for not changing enough. This makes Batman realize that maybe instead of beating up poor people, he should try and save them. I do like this arc for the movie. It at least tries to confront Batman's violent actions and tries to make him a symbol of hope. Again, the fact that they chalk up Riddler's actions to being crazy and a terrorist just completely ruins the story for me. Honestly, I've read quite a few Batman comics. I've seen all the live-action movies several times. I've seen 3 animated shows. I've played hundreds of hours of all the Arkham games. You could say I'm a pretty big fan of the guy. But even I can admit he's not a very good hero. The creation of Batman was very iffy to begin with. Superman was obviously a hero from the first comic. He helped a woman suffering from domestic abuse and exposed a corrupt politician. Batman started by solving the murder of some rich CEO and killing another. He didn't exactly start as the virtuous superhero we know him as currently. This movie represents everything I find insidious about Hollywood interpretations of these comic book characters, and it seems that we're going to get yet another disappointing live-action Batman trilogy. Still better than anything Marvel has released, though. Except Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, that shit slapped. I never expected the Batman, in parentheses 2022, to be a radical communist rally, but I at least expected a competent movie, and that's what I got. Almost. Just to clarify, my problem with this movie isn't that it didn't decide to go the radical route, because historically Batman has never been used for that. But my real problem is that the movie promised to do something like that. Throughout the first 2/3 of the movie, it was completely going in that direction, and then by the end it just ruined it. And that's what I have a problem with. And also, I just think that superheroes are increasingly becoming obsolete in our modern society. While the heroic figure is never going to leave us, I think superheroes as a concept and as a genre of media is kind of becoming less and less relevant over time. And honestly, superhero movies don't excite me anymore. Although this movie actually was worth watching. I would say. But again, it still represents all of the problems that I have with the genre and the concept as a whole. I still think it really lost all its steam towards the end, and its super self-serious tone makes it really hard to be immersed, but I will still watch it again, and many more times after that. We have no shortage of radical films recently that more people have to see. But I'm glad we got this fascinating reimagining of the Batman. It's a real breath of fresh air after Zack Snyder's horrible take. What really pissed me off, though, was the Joker teaser at the end. We do not need another Joker interpretation. Please. There are so many Batman villains that need some live-action representation. We've only gotten 2 good Mr. Freeze stories, one of them being from the animated series, and the other being a paid DLC side quest in the Batman Arkham Knight. Also, I was just waiting for Batman and Jim Gordon to kiss, but sadly that didn't happen. I really like that DC has kind of given free reign over the creation of superhero movies since the failure of Justice League, but I think maybe it's time for superhero movies to stop now. They've ruled over cinema all through the 2010s, but I think it's time to give the power to the people. And I think that's kind of happening. Studios like A24 have been really good at putting out like really fascinating movies by independent creators and people who don't have their voices unfortunately heard as much. But for now, it's still going in the direction of Marvel and Disney. And by the way, I made this in a really short amount of time, if you couldn't tell, and it was just to get this off my chest. After seeing the movie, I couldn't not talk about it. Also, I did steal a lot of these ideas from Jesse Gender's video on Batman, so please watch that. There are still some things I didn't get to talk about, like the fact that they rely on the tired trope of killing a sex worker and Batman saying she deserved it. Ugh, that was weird. I think this is my way of making up for the indefinite cancellation of my Arkham Asylum analysis. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you some other time.